The studio lights bathed the set in a warm glow as Anderson Cooper extended his hand. "Meghan, welcome. It's good to have you here." His voice was calm, inviting, carrying the steady confidence of a man who had conducted 1,000 high-profile interviews before. Meghan Markle, poised and graceful, returned his smile and adjusted her seat. For a brief moment, everything felt serene. The audience watched closely, expecting another thoughtful conversation. Measured, polite, familiar. The early questions were soft, almost comforting. Anderson asked about her new projects, her family life, her experiences transitioning from actress to duchess to advocate. Meghan answered smoothly, with that polished grace that had become her armor. Her words were deliberate, thoughtful, controlled. She leaned slightly forward, her smile framed perfectly for the cameras, her tone calm, rehearsed, yet warm. To most, it seemed like the interview would glide forward without friction. But Anderson's reputation was not built on small talk. He had a way of letting the silence linger, of pushing past the surface until the cracks began to show. The shift came slowly, so subtle the audience hardly noticed it at first. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing with quiet focus. His voice lowered, calm but edged with precision. "Meghan," he began carefully, "you've spoken often about the struggles you faced within the royal institution, yet some of your accounts have been challenged, contradicted even, by those close to the palace. How do you respond to that?" The question hung in the air like a spark. Meghan's smile froze for half a beat before she caught herself, adjusting quickly. "Well, Anderson," she said softly, "when you live through something personally, your truth isn't defined by someone else's version of events." She tried to keep her voice steady, but a faint edge had slipped into her words. Anderson didn't back down. He nodded, then pressed again, his tone polite but unyielding. "But when stories change, when details don't line up, critics argue that it damages credibility. Do you think your narrative has ever been shaped?" The audience shifted in their seats. It was no longer just an interview, it was a duel of control. Meghan's fingers laced tightly together on her lap, her shoulders stiffening. She still smiled, but it no longer reached her eyes. For the first time, tension shimmered just beneath the surface. Her reply was slower this time, measured. "Narratives are always shaped," she said, her gaze steady on Anderson. "Especially when powerful institutions and the press decide what they want the public to believe. I've spoken my truth and I won't apologize for it." The studio was quiet. Too quiet. Anderson leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on hers, unflinching. "And yet," he said evenly, "there are those who claim your truth sometimes leaves out inconvenient details. Is truth selective, Meghan? Or absolute?" Her chest rose with a sharper breath. The charm in her expression was gone now, replaced by something steelier. The transformation was almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The smile had faded, replaced by the tightening of her jaw, the narrowing of her eyes. For the viewers at home, the shift was electric. What had begun as a soft, polite conversation was now charged with unease. The tension was thick enough to feel through the screen. Meghan sat straighter, as if bracing for a blow. Anderson waited, letting the silence drag just long enough to make her discomfort clear. Finally, Meghan spoke, her voice lower, firmer. "Anderson, the problem isn't whether truth is selective. The problem is whether people want to hear it at all. I lived what I lived. That can't be erased because it doesn't match someone else's version." A murmur rippled through the audience. The shift in her tone had not gone unnoticed. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a test of endurance, of composure, of credibility. The calm that had defined the opening moments of the conversation was slipping away, second by second. Anderson gave the faintest nod, his lips pressed together as if considering whether to continue down this path. But the gleam in his eyes said it all. He wasn't finished. He had touched a nerve, and both of them knew it. Meghan adjusted her blazer, straightening her posture as though shielding herself. She forced a small, almost brittle smile, but it carried none of the warmth from earlier. The air felt heavy now. Each word weighed against the silence that followed. The audience leaned forward, drawn deeper into the storm that was slowly, inexorably building. They could sense it. Something was about to break. And though Meghan tried to maintain her composure, the faintest tremor in her hand gave her away. The calm before the storm was over. The energy in the studio had shifted. What began as a measured conversation was now edging toward confrontation. Anderson Cooper's questions, once warm and carefully framed, had grown sharper, cutting closer to the heart of long-debated controversies. The air carried a charge, and every word seemed to vibrate with tension. "Meghan," Cooper said, his tone polite but unmistakably firm. "In your past interviews, you've spoken about the deep challenges you faced in the royal family. But in more recent appearances, some of those details have changed. Do you understand why critics call your story inconsistent?" The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the studio. Meghan blinked slowly, her smile faltering just slightly before she caught herself. She shifted in her seat, the smooth composure from earlier now under visible strain. Her fingers curled together in her lap, a quiet signal that the question had cut deeper than she wanted to admit. "Well, Anderson," she began, her voice carefully measured. "When you're living inside a situation, experiences unfold in layers. Sometimes it takes distance to understand what really happened." Anderson tilted his head, studying her. He didn't smile. He didn't let her words linger without challenge. "But you see," he said slowly, "distance can also look like revision. Some say your accounts are less about truth and more about convenience. What do you say to them?" The audience shifted in their seats. A hush fell over the room, the kind of silence that only grew heavier with each second. Meghan inhaled sharply, and for the first time her shoulders stiffened. She glanced briefly at the floor, then back up, locking eyes with Anderson. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" she fired back. "When I speak, people assume it's about convenience. When others speak, it's taken as fact. I've shared my reality, and it's not my responsibility if people refuse to accept it." Her voice was firmer now, a hint of heat breaking through the polished calm. But Anderson was relentless. He leaned slightly forward, his papers untouched on the desk, his gaze fixed on hers. "And yet," he pressed, "in one interview, you said you felt completely isolated, cut off from support. Later you mentioned a network of friends who stood by you. Which is it? Were you alone or were you supported?" The words hit like a spark in dry air. Meghan shifted again, her hands tightening, her expression flickering with irritation. She parted her lips to speak, then hesitated, her silence stretching just long enough to draw the audience further to the edge of their seats. When she finally spoke, her tone had changed. Lower, steadier, sharper. "Both can be true, Anderson. You can feel utterly isolated even when people are around you. You can have support and still feel abandoned. It's not a contradiction. It's a reality people don't want to understand." Her words carried force, but the tension in her body betrayed the strain. The audience felt it, the discomfort, the battle for control. The woman who had entered with elegance and charm now looked cornered, her defenses rising with each question. Anderson's expression didn't soften. If anything, the quiet intensity in his eyes grew stronger. "But Meghan," he said almost gently, "don't you think that leaves room for doubt? That when details shift, the truth itself starts to feel unstable?" That word, unstable, landed hard. Meghan's jaw tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She uncrossed and recrossed her legs, the faintest tremor in her movement betraying her rising frustration. The camera zoomed closer, capturing every flicker of emotion, every micro-expression that told the story she was trying to conceal. The audience leaned forward, caught in the gravity of the moment. The room was silent except for the sound of her breathing, slightly quicker now. It was clear she was fighting to hold her ground, to steady herself against the current of Cooper's persistence. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was louder now, steadier, edged with defiance. "What's unstable," she said, her eyes locked on his, "is a media industry that twists words and weaponizes them. That's the instability. Because the truth gets lost in the noise." "My truth hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is how people choose to hear it." The words reverberated across the studio, sharp and unyielding. A few audience members gasped softly, others exchanged glances, but no one moved. Anderson didn't flinch. He simply let her words hang in the charged air, refusing to relieve the tension. The silence became suffocating, pressing in on both of them. It was no longer an interview, it was a collision, and the storm was only getting stronger. Meghan straightened her posture, her chin lifting defiantly, but her eyes gave her away. A storm was brewing, and the cracks in her composure were beginning to show. The audience knew it, Anderson knew it, and Meghan, despite every ounce of control she fought to maintain, knew it too. The battle lines had been drawn, neither was backing down. The studio was silent, yet the silence carried weight, thick with the kind of anticipation that only comes before something irreversible. Meghan sat straighter now, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her smile was gone. Her voice, once calm and deliberate, carried a sharper edge. The crack in her composure was small but unmistakable, and the cameras caught every detail. "You know what the problem is, Anderson?" Meghan said, her tone crisp and unyielding. "It's not my words that keep changing. It's the way the media twists them. Every interview I've ever given has been cut apart, reassembled, turned into a headline that bears no resemblance to what I actually said. My truth isn't the problem. The problem is people like you." Gasps rippled quietly through the audience. Meghan's voice didn't rise in volume, but the force behind it made the words land like blows. Her gaze locked on Cooper, unblinking, daring him to push further. But Anderson Cooper was not a man who backed down. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the papers in his hand forgotten. His voice was low, steady, and merciless. "Meghan, with all due respect, blaming the media doesn't answer the question. These aren't edited clips we're talking about. These are your own words in full interviews recorded and watched by millions. If your story keeps shifting, how are viewers supposed to trust you?" The tension in the room spiked. The audience shifted forward as if leaning closer might let them catch every tremor in Meghan's voice, every flicker in her expression. The air felt charged, like the stillness before lightning splits the sky. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, it looked like she might remain silent, that she might allow the weight of Cooper's words to hang unanswered. But then, she exhaled sharply, her composure cracking open. "You don't get it, do you?" she shot back, her voice louder now, her tone bristling with frustration. "You sit here acting as if I'm on trial, dissecting every syllable I've ever spoken, while ignoring the bigger picture. My story has never changed. My pain has never changed. What changes are the ways I've been forced to defend myself, over and over again, because people like you refuse to believe me unless it fits your narrative." Her voice trembled with fury, her words like sharp glass cutting through the stillness. The camera zoomed in, capturing the intensity in her eyes, the fire that had now overtaken her polished calm. Anderson didn't flinch. His expression was cool, his voice measured but firm. "But Meghan, if every question becomes an attack in your eyes, how can the public separate accountability from victimhood? You've asked for your truth to be heard. We're hearing it, but when pressed on inconsistencies, you call it twisting. Isn't that just avoiding the hard questions?" The audience gasped again, louder this time. Meghan's composure, already strained, broke further. Her posture tightened, her shoulders rigid, her voice sharp as she snapped back. "You're not asking hard questions, Anderson. You're recycling the same accusations, the same tabloid garbage, pretending it's journalism. You don't want answers, you want a spectacle." "Well, congratulations, you've got one." The words were fire, and the flames spread instantly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces looked shocked, others thrilled, but all were riveted. The clash had exploded, and there was no turning back. Anderson's eyes narrowed slightly, but his tone remained controlled, almost too calm. "I think the viewers at home will decide whether this is spectacle or truth. But right now, Meghan, what they're seeing is someone unwilling to take responsibility for her own contradictions." That sentence was the breaking point. Meghan's jaw tightened so hard the tension was visible even through the camera lens. Her breathing quickened, and for the first time, her voice cracked with the force of her anger. "You sit there in your chair, holding your notes, pretending to be objective, while you tear me apart piece by piece. I've lived through trauma you will never understand. And now you reduce it to sound bites and contradictions. You don't care about truth, Anderson. You care about ratings." Her words struck like thunder. The studio erupted with whispers and gasps, the audience caught between shock and fascination. The producers backstage scrambled, their voices frantic in the earpieces of camera operators who dared not cut away. Anderson leaned back slightly, but his gaze stayed locked on Meghan. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of steel. If you think accountability is about ratings, Meghan, then perhaps you've misunderstood why you're sitting in this chair. The two locked eyes, their expressions equally unyielding. Meghan's composure was gone now, replaced with raw anger, her voice sharp and cutting. The clash was no longer subtle, it was explosive, uncontainable. The cameras drank it in, every second of the storm that had broken wide open. For the audience, there was no escaping the truth. This was history unfolding before their eyes, a confrontation that would ignite headlines around the world. And as Meghan leaned forward, her voice trembling with rage, and Anderson sat unflinching, calm in the chaos, the breaking point had been reached. Neither would walk away unscathed. The storm had arrived. The interview had already turned tense. Anderson Cooper leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Meghan Markle as though he could peel away every layer of her composure. For most of the night she had kept her tone measured, her posture upright, her words carefully chosen. But something had shifted. The questions had grown sharper, more relentless. No longer the warm introduction she had been promised. "Meghan," Cooper pressed, "how do you respond to critics who say your story has changed with each interview? Some feel you've rewritten events to fit the moment." Her lips tightened. The smile she had worn earlier had vanished completely. "Anderson, I have lived this experience. My truth doesn't change because others choose to twist it. What changes is how much patience I have left for the endless scrutiny," the audience murmured. There was a charge in the air now, like a storm about to break. Cooper didn't back down. "But surely you must admit, when you gave that famous interview years ago, you left out details you're now adding. Why should people trust that what you're saying now is the complete truth?" Meghan's eyes narrowed. She shifted in her seat, exhaling through her nose. "Do you really think anyone could tell their entire story in one sitting? Do you have any idea what it's like to have every breath, every word, dissected and turned into a headline?" Silence stretched. The cameras zoomed closer, catching the sharp edge in her voice, the flash of frustration in her eyes. Finally, she leaned forward, her tone lower but more cutting. "This isn't an interview. It's an ambush. And frankly, I'm tired of playing this game." A ripple of shock swept through the audience. Cooper raised a hand slightly as if to calm the tension. "Meghan, no one here is trying to ambush you. But people deserve answers. Don't you think walking away now only raises more questions?" That was the breaking point. Meghan's hands moved decisively. She unclipped the microphone from her dress with trembling fingers. The sound echoed as the mic brushed against fabric. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Gasps filled the studio. "This," she gestured around the set, her voice trembling with both anger and emotion, "is exactly what I've been talking about. You create a trap, then call it journalism. I will not be silenced, but I also will not sit here and let you turn me into your spectacle." The audience erupted, some applauding, others whispering in disbelief. Anderson Cooper froze for a moment, his face pale under the studio lights. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. The control he was known for, the calm professionalism, seemed to falter in that instant. Meghan turned on her heel and stormed toward the edge of the stage. A producer tried to stop her, but she brushed past. The cameras caught every step, every flicker of defiance in her stride. The image of her back as she walked away burned itself into the lens, a moment destined to replay endlessly across social media, news outlets and living room screens. For several long seconds, Cooper remained silent. His hands rested on the desk, his jaw tense, his eyes following her exit. Then finally he spoke, his voice unsteady but attempting control. "Well, as you can see, the Duchess has chosen to end this interview." He paused, searching for words. "This conversation will no doubt continue far beyond this studio." And that was it. The cameras lingered on the empty chair where Meghan had sat just minutes before, now only a hollow reminder of the explosion that had just unfolded. Within hours, headlines would blanket the internet. "Meghan walks out on Anderson Cooper." Clips of her tearing off the mic would be shared millions of times, dissected by pundits, debated in households. Was it courage? Was it defiance? Or was it exactly the kind of spectacle she claimed to despise? No matter the interpretation, one thing was clear. This moment had changed the narrative. Forever.